Hello again. Today I want to talk to you about some of my favorite books. Now, I searched through all of my apartment and I couldn't find all the books that I thought I had, but I'd still recommend them anyway. So what I'm going to do is tell you about some of the ones I did find, recommend the ones that I still like, and go through by genre, going through different genres and also going through different authors that I really enjoy. So to start out, let's start with biography. My favorite biography is actually an autobiography, Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, by Richard Feynman. And it details his life on the Manhattan Project and becoming a physics professor at Cornell and Caltech, and I would just really recommend it. He also wrote a sequel called What Do You Care What Other People Think? Now, I wasn't able to find copies of either of those, but I did find a biography of his, Feynman, that's actually a graphic novel, and it covers a lot of the same anecdotes and stories, and just worth a read. So next, I also want to talk about one of my favorite authors. His name is Neal Stephenson, and he has a lot of books out there that are really fun. To start with, probably his most famous book is Snow Crash, but my recommendation for a good book to start is The Diamond Age. These are sort of spiritual successors to one another. Diamond Age is really fun. My favorite book of his is Cryptonomicon, but it wouldn't be recommended for everybody. You really have to be a certain type of personality to like it. So moving on, some of those are going into sci-fi a little bit, so I want to move on to some of my favorite sci-fi authors. So my favorite sci-fi author is probably Arthur C. Clarke. And I was able to find this, Childhood's End, which is a very famous book of his. And I was able to find just a set of collected stories. My favorite story from Arthur C. Clarke is Against the Fall of Night, which is also called The City and the Stars. I enjoyed 2001, although I would rate it equal with the movie, so probably just watch the movie. But 2010, 2061 were also really fun to read. Moving on from Arthur C. Clarke, I also enjoy Heinlein, Robert A. Heinlein. So probably his most famous books are Starship Troopers and Stranger in a Strange Land. I'm not a huge fan of either of these. Actually, my favorite one of his books is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, but I wasn't able to find a copy of that. I also have a lot of nostalgia for Time Enough for Love by him. But if you like Heinlein, he just has a ton of books, so you can't go wrong. Well, that's not true. You can go wrong. There's some weird ones in there. So that's it for sci-fi. Fantasy, I have a few ideas. So of course, Tolkien is fun, but I never was able to actually finish Lord of the Rings. I found it very dry. What I did really like was the Mistborn trilogy. So that's these three books: Mistborn, Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages. And these are by Brandon Sanderson, and just a really fun time to read. Not that intellectual, but it's just a lot of fun. And for me, at some points, it felt like he was building a mechanic system for like a video game or something. He's really good at designing magic systems and world building, and yeah, plot and character development may take a second place to that. Still really good. I'd also like to go into some comic books. So I mentioned the Heinlein comic before, and I would say I'm a big fan of Batman. So I have a few graphic novels from Batman that I want to talk about. Probably the one I have the most nostalgia for is the Nightfall series, just because this was the first continuation of a comic that I was able to read through and fully get the full arc across many issues of the comic. But to me, the best Batman story is The Long Halloween. And if you've seen The Dark Knight, you will recognize a lot of plot elements from The Long Halloween. It's really good. So I'd also want to talk about a few other genres. So my favorite children's book is The Phantom Tollbooth. I just love this book. And I have a lot of nostalgia growing up for another series, which is The Great Brain, which is not that great, but it was fun for me to read when I was a kid. But the Phantom Tollbooth would really fill a special place in my heart for that. So if you haven't read this, even as an adult, I'd recommend it. Moving on to humor, my favorite humor book is Lamb. also titled The Gospel According to Biff, Christ's Childhood Pal. I found this really entertaining to read. It was very funny. You have to have a certain sense of humor about a lot of religious topics, so that might not be for everyone, but I really enjoyed it. Moving on to the next category, self-help. There are a lot of self-help books out there, and I'm not a big fan of most of them. I do enjoy How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's aged a bit. It was written in the 30s, and some of its ideas are a little simplistic, right? One of its recommendations is just address somebody by name a lot. You know, hi Bob, how you doing, Bob? Nice to meet you, Bob. And that the more you use their name, the more friendly they will be. And I think people find that a little strange nowadays. But there are a lot of thoughts and ideas in here that still are applicable today. And you can see that I still have some bookmarks in here from times that I've reread it and wanted to remember certain passages. Next, I would like to talk about horror. Now, I don't really like horror books. I was never a big fan of those, or monsters or whatever. The closest that I got was World War Z, which I wouldn't really call a horror book. I'd call more maybe sci-fi a little bit. I mean, zombies. This book I went into a little skeptical, but found really enjoyable. I've never seen the movie. I don't plan to see the movie, but the book was nice. And lastly, I want to talk about my favorite book of all time, which basically I was not able to find a copy of, but it's Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut. And I really enjoyed reading that as a teenager, and then I came back to it several years later, and I thought, oh, well, I probably liked it then, but I don't like it now, and I reread it, and I really liked it again. So it remains my favorite book. I've read other things by Vonnegut, and like Slaughterhouse-Five just didn't grip me the same way, which was a little weird, but so it goes. So I'd recommend that for anybody who hasn't read it. It's also one that has a certain humor to it. If you like sci-fi, it has some sort of sci-fi elements. So if you had to pick out of everything that I've listed here, 3 books, I would say Diamond Age to start if you haven't read any Neal Stephenson. If you had, I would say Cryptonomicon. I would definitely recommend Cat's Cradle if you haven't read that. And if you're looking for sort of a series, I would recommend Mistborn just because it's a lot of fun. Well, that's it. I hope you were able to get something out of these recommendations, and if not, I hope you were at least able to see some books that you like. Until next time, see ya.